Please help me give big smooches to my guest, Suzy Hopkins and Hallie Bateman.
Hi,
Welcome,
Donna.
ladies.
Thank you so much for having us.
Excited
Thank
to be
you
here.
for being here. Thank you for this beautiful book that takes people through a very common experience. Breakups. Everybody's been through at least one breakup. And I know there are a lot of people, especially at the beginning of the year, they call this divorce month, breakup month. January is the time when a lot of people start to reevaluate what they want in a relationship. So this is a really valuable resource, and you've made it so accessible. You made it not feel heavy to go through this experience, and also you've given a lot of wisdom and guidance along the way. So how did this book come to be, Suzy? What made you say, I have to write this book right now?
Well, when our first book came out, our first book was called What to Do When I'm Gone. And that's about carrying on after the loss of your mother. And Hallie really she made me write that. And then we worked on that collaboratively. And my husband left just as we were about to begin a book tour with that first book. And I was in the kind of shock that the world just fell out from under me. And I said, kind of ironically, as we were preparing for the new book, God, I should be writing What to Do When You Get Dumped, because I felt so severely dumped. And so that was the first inkling of the idea. And Hallie bought me a tarot reading in which the tarot reader, without knowing anything, described this book project I'd already had an inkling for. And I just said, I actually broke out crying. I said, I guess that's the green light I need. And really writing this was really a long note to myself while I was still trying to figure out if and how I was going to get through this.
Wow. Oh, you're speaking my language. I also read tarot. I'm like, that makes total sense. I'm sure there's some people listening. They're like, so that changed your life? And I'm like, yes, it makes absolute sense. The reader said it, and so therefore it must be true. Where do you land on this, Hallie?
Well, I lived in LA. Like, I now live in Cincinnati, but I lived in LA for almost 8 years. So of course I have a tarot reader now.
Of course.
And yeah, for me, I mean, I was there, close to my mom throughout the years after the divorce. And what kind of made me gift that reading to her was that, my mom's a brilliant writer and was having all these ideas. And of course, I'm a bratty little child being like, write one of them, please. Like, because I would get excited. And I had heard her talk about this book.
What does that process look like when because especially being so close to it, Suzy, like you went through what many people would call as a trauma. Like it's a pretty big life event, right? To have you said it was your husband of 30 years?
30 years, yeah.
And he just walked out and
well, it was an old girlfriend who had really appeared periodically throughout the marriage and anyway, yeah, it was traumatic. And I think the trauma was in that the minute he told me, and he was kind of, in love with her by this point in his mind after when he's saying, hey, I'm leaving. And I think that for me, the difficult thing was the moment he told me that, I could no longer talk to him as my husband. There was a third person in the room at all times, even though she wasn't physically there. And that was the hard part, this person that I'd shared my life with. And that's what I struggled so much to get around. It ended all our contact at my choice because I didn't want to be in a three-way relationship and everything relates. So that was the hard part. It was somewhat like a death because of the suddenness. And 3 years in, I decided when I was thinking about the book to interview people who'd been savagely dumped, because I thought I need some help. The best help is to find somebody that this has happened to, because I felt so alone. And I interviewed a half dozen people, strangers, and at great length. And that was the impetus to really go into recording my own story, because they all, I had them all in tears, and sometimes it had been 5 or 10 years earlier that the person had lost their relationship. So I really began to understand how long it could take for the death of a relationship for you to come through it. You don't get over it, I don't think, but you come through to a new life, and that takes, in some cases, so much longer than I ever imagined.
So was that part of your decision to sort of time the book have it be a countdown of days, and to start at the end, but then get people back to that place of moving forward to the future and acceptance? Because when you look at a number like day 1576, it feels like, oh, this is going to take forever. This is going to be a long time.
And I would say that for me, the countdown isn't really true. It's not like one day I magically recovered, but one day I decided I had to decide that my heart was unbroken, because I just couldn't go on. And I had significantly healed in many ways, and had moments of joy come back in. But I just decided part of this is you taking control of your life at some point when the real grief a lot of the significant grief has subsided, saying, okay, when you start saying what's next and how do I move forward? And there just has to be a day when you say, it's unbroken. I may still always carry this, but it's unbroken, and I am now a new or whole or different person, maybe the same person with different knowledge. And I that was a decision I made on a day when I felt like so that was actually the day. I'm into calendars, so that actually it was 1,582 days.
Wow. And so when you wrote it initially, you wrote the whole story and the advice and healing strategies, and then Hallie, you came in to illustrate it. That must have been a really tricky needle to thread, because you found a sort of visual language with the illustrations where it adds, in some moments it adds intensity, in some moments it adds levity. And when you're so close to the story, with it being your mom's story, I imagine that was hard to get right in the illustrations.
We actually went to a cabin together to work on it for maybe like 4 or 5 days to just kind of talk over the original draft. And what that looks like is talking everything out and kind of throwing ideas back and forth, where I'll think of something and sketch it and show her, and then she won't understand, and then we'll squabble for like 5 minutes, and then she'll have an idea that I don't understand, but then we both get it and it clicks and we get really excited, and then we jump to the next page. And because my mom and I are so close, and because we've made a book before, I think we are developing a shorthand and an understanding of you write with images, and there's such a power to graphic storytelling. This is the language that I write in, that I practice in, where we might take a paragraph that my mom wrote that is beautiful, but we will understand, okay, well, what's on the page? So actually, if we are drawing all this, we don't need 4 of those sentences. We just need the one powerful sentence, and the picture says everything else, or the picture will be a reversal of the language, and then there's an interplay. Like, there's so much you can do with words and images. And I think what's really special about our collaboration and unique is that a lot of people, like, I've illustrated books before where I receive a manuscript and I'm illustrating it, and I don't talk to the author until the book comes out. This is my mom and I hashing out these conversations. And because also I'm her daughter, and the ex in the book is my dad, so who I love and I'm close with. So, there was a really interesting way that we were able to talk, where I know what her journey has been. So I might say, oh, you went on that first date. Let's include the first date post-divorce in the book. Like, that's got to be a piece of it. And, kind of pulling out, like, what do I see are the threads there? And then, we get to go back and forth on how that looks in the book. And then there's the way that, you can so easily be like, this person is evil. Who's my ex? This person is evil, or sucks, or, we hate them or something. But, I think me coming to the book, I can't second that. I can be like, he sucks. He doesn't deserve you. Like, I can be that, but also that's my dad. And there's a level that I think my mom and I both were able to, through our conversations and working on this book together, we're able to get to the deeper truths of it that are often missed when it's just like, bye, like, dump him. Like, it's actually like, that's a really flawed person, and like, that's sad for him too. Like, it sucks. Like, it sucks that you didn't see each other, and that this happened this way, and that there's I don't know. I think that we were able to get to a depth of the story, and like the truth underneath the kind of cliches that can be thrown around breakups.
I love this perspective on it too, because going through this together and having your relationship still with your father, it sort of makes the experience, I think, of the breakup a little more, it kind of gives you more context and makes it a little bit more holistic. Like you were saying, it's easy to have the platitudes of just like, get back out there. Don't date him, girl. Yeah. And it's so much more nuanced and so much more complicated than that. And I think you've illustrated that and written about that experience beautifully. Suzy, I want to go back to you. You were saying you spoke to a lot of people who had been through breakups of varying time frames. How did you come to the advice in this book? Because there's a lot. It's not really presented as an advice book, but there were little nuggets throughout that sort of validate the experience of these are all the phases you'll go through in a breakup, but also ways to enter into those experiences in a new way. So like, I'll give you an example. I really focused on, there was one, this is going to sound creepy. I'm like, I focused on the shower, take a shower tip.
Yeah.
That sounds creepy, but it's not creepy, I swear, because it wasn't just like, take a shower, girl, wash your face or whatever. It was like almost like a meditation within it. Like, picture yourself as a tree. So now in the shower, I'm not just here cleansing myself. I'm actually being with myself. I'm visualizing something that's making me stronger. Where did all of that wisdom and where did the specific advice come from?
It's interesting you say that because Hallie reminded me that I did leave notes all around the house, and the way I wrote this was really from a place of how on earth am I going to get through this? I'm 3 years in, I'm still kind of a mess, and I had bought my husband kept our house, and I bought a place in the country, and I went into this like country life where I was splitting wood, and I had suddenly retired. I had owned a magazine and been a journalist for my life, so I'm used to big picture synopsis type thinking anyway, but I had to apply it to what I was going through, and I started to go, I'm going to write the book, and the book is kind of a note of encouragement because I couldn't find any such encouragement in the book world, just something that really felt like it fit me and what I was going through. And so I started saying, well, what is it exactly that has helped so far? Well, walking, 10,000 miles in a circle, that actually helped. I had a driveway I walked. Every day I would walk until I wasn't depressed anymore. And then just these little things that nobody says, no, you've got to get through today. This isn't about looking ahead 10 years. This is about you maintaining your balance for the next 2 hours. And I think that's what people get wrong is they want to look ahead and say everything will be fine pretty soon. And, that may not be the case. So how do you build a life back that is a new one that you have no idea how to patch together? And so the all these things I would write down when I did something that was helpful to me. And in the shower, I took that shower, and I'm into nature, and I was into hiking, and I that's just something I thought of in the shower, that really I am transforming. I feel like I've been struck by lightning, but I'm going to come through this. And it's just these little kind of daily meditations that I threw in a box. I'd write down the shower thing, I'd throw it in a box, and then I'd pull out the box and
I forgot about the box.
the box, yeah. And then when I had enough stuff, I go, well, I guess that looks like it's starting to be a book. And I understood when I wrote this, I was very raw still, even 3 years in. And Hallie, the thing that was remarkable about our working together was Hallie stayed with me and worked with me and collaborated with me in a headspace that was not particularly good for me because there's writing a book about your experiences, which in a way forces you to stay in and experience the experiences that you wish had never happened and would just go away and you never had to think about again. And so writing it was a challenge. There were a lot of tears when Hallie and I hit topics that she said, this just doesn't feel like you have enough on this topic. And then I'd go, well, I'm going to go back and write it again. But I really just wanted to throw in the towel, because you have to stay in the space of your hurt enough to figure out how you are walking through and where you're headed. And that was what the book is, a note to myself that at some point I thought would maybe be helpful as a note of encouragement to other people.
Yeah, I'm sure it will be very, very helpful for people who are in that space and able to really see themselves reflected on those pages and see the exact phases that they're going through. Of like, I also loved the roller coaster page where it really shows how the road to healing is not linear. There are ups and there are downs. And then somebody refers to your ex as your ex for the first time, and you're like, oh no, I'm going down again. And then, you find those moments of centering again, like you were just describing. Do you have a favorite piece of advice from the book, or exercise, or I guess you called it like a note that you left, or was there an experience you described that you think was the most transformational for you, Suzy?
There's a segment on forgiveness, and I have to say, and it's titled Forgive or Forget. And this doesn't really answer your question, but to me, it's a very significant one, because I spent a whole lot of my, human existence in the early, first year or two going, I guess I'd better forgive him so I can move on. I had this, and I read a lot of stuff about forgiveness, and I go, I'm so angry, but I really need to, I just had this notion that it was something that it was a moral good for me to plod down the path of forgiveness, but I just could never get there. And Hallie made me rewrite that about 3 times, and I was crying by the second one, and the third one I was screaming. And I did, so for whatever reason, the idea of forgiveness, and I concluded that really the focus needed to be, instead of lingering on the person's actions that I couldn't control, was on my ability to move forward, and regardless of, and that, honestly, I don't know why I was so stuck on that, but I decided that it's about you and moving forward, because once the person's made that decision, he probably made the decision quite a bit earlier than I ever knew about, and it was just done for him. And so then it becomes, I spent too much time trying to apply logic to a situation in which logic does not apply.
Yes, and I think you could do quite well if you were able to bring that parfum that Hallie pictured in the page. The forget de parfum. One spritz and it's like it never happened. I swear. I swear you need to like the next print of the book include also a package deal with the parfum, because I think a lot of people would love that. But society really does put that pressure on us to like we hear that saying all the time, like, well, you have to forgive and forget and find forgiveness. It's like, well, I mean, do you have to find forgiveness, or do you just have to find peace?
Right.
In yourself.
And I say
acceptance.
peace. Yeah. Because it's just but for me that was an awfully big sticking point. And it is no longer.
I'm happy to hear you say that, Suzy. All right, Hallie, give us the goods.
Well,
what were your favorites?
This is like one of the earliest pages that my mom wrote, and it's called "Behold the Badger," and I drew a little badger. He
kind of looks like one of those like rap boyfriends, that was trending last year.
Totally.
Where he's like kind of cute, but kind of like, ugh.
So I love this page because I just think it's like pure Suzy Hopkins goodness and wisdom. Maybe can I just read it?
Please.
Sure. So it's called "Behold the Badger." You are amazing, a strange creature by virtue of being human, but an amazing one with your funny nose, oddly shaped ears, body that grows and shrinks and shifts with the seasons and years. You would not look at a badger and say, "What an ugly badger. Just look at its bulging stomach and odd eyes." You would appreciate its uniqueness, the adorable stripes, the squatty yet confident stance. You would not pass judgment on a badger. Why are we so prone to do it to people? Let's take care of ourselves and the badgers too, with some basic respect. Don't make the mistake of thinking that because X dumped you, you are less than you should be, that you don't measure up. X may have left for reasons that had nothing to do with who you really are, how you look, the uniqueness of your character. Though it feels as if you were in the crosshairs, it's possible that you were not even in X's field of vision.
Wow. That's deep. Suzy, how does that feel hearing that again?
It's just true. I mean, this is all just true to my experience. And I guess I got the confidence to, it is in a sense an advice book, but it's all what I specifically lived through. And I really gained the confidence from talking to the people who'd been far more savagely dumped than I, who, talked about wanting to, not continue living. Their life was upheaved in ways that you just can't imagine. So I came to understand that this really was about the person that left them, and they're still, you're intact, you're a beautiful person in all the unique qualities you have, and that hasn't changed by virtue of someone making a different decision to leave. Mm-hmm. So
very true. Very true. The part that really stuck with me was like, you may not have been in X's field of vision, which
it's true.
It kind of burns on its own, Suzy. Like, wait, you didn't even see me?
It burns, and then you add you add another person who's brought into the equation, their new partner who suddenly is in the room, and that honestly was just something I thought really could never happen. I'm so naive. I just know, certainly that's just outside the realm of possibility. And so then you understand that person had a different plan and didn't make that plan known to you and proceeded to follow that plan. So
I would not say that you're naive, but that's another episode. We could unpack. We have to take a quick break. When we come back, I want to get into some nitty gritty details of some of the tips that you give and some of the experiences that you suggest for people and how they can apply them and in a real world context. So Stick around. We'll have more Dates and Mates with Suzy and Hallie in just a moment. Okay, welcome back. I am here with Hallie Bateman and Suzy Hopkins. They are the authors of the new book, What to Do When You Get Dumped. So we were talking a little bit about your process before the break, but now I want to get into some of the nitty-gritty details of the I hesitate to say advice. I'm like, I don't know what to call this because it's like not an advice book, but it is kind of an advice book, but it's your personal story. Okay, so in the specifics, on day 1167, you talk about visiting places you used to go with your ex. Do you think this is potentially a risky thing to do? And what would you say the benefits of doing that, of going through an experience like that would be, Suzy?
Well, that was again a personal experience where Hallie and I were in Berkeley, and I looked up on the hillside, and we were walking and on this just on the street at breakfast time, and I looked up and I saw this place that my husband and I had stayed, this beautiful hotel, and I just was hit by it that, oh my God, now I'm here and suddenly life is different. And I told Hallie this, and she said, she said, you got to pave that stuff over. This is good that we're here doing this because we're going to pave it over with something new. So that came exactly from Hallie just helping me by a common sense application. I think it's very important to go to reclaim some space. Having said that, I just moved across the country to get out of the town where we had lived for 40 years, and that's also positive.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly helpful to not have to face the spaces and places of your prior relationship. How do you pave over? Hallie, you said that Suzy said that you were part of that experience for her. How did you make a new association with a place that had an old story associated with it?
Yeah, so that idea had actually come from my own breakup in my 20s. Like when I was in my own breakup where I got this wisdom, it's like I'd taken him to a place that was special to me. Then that became a bad memory. Then I was scared to go back to the place that was special to me because I was like, ugh, like that. I don't even want to like think about that. That's like disturbing to me.
You ruined it now.
Yeah, it feels like sullied somehow. And yeah, I think the experience of returning with a friend or me and my mom going back to Berkeley, and we are there together and we're having breakfast and we're talking about it, but we're also just like there on a new day and things are different. And suddenly that past memory becomes a lot smaller. And I think the story of that place, like I know exactly where we were, Mom. I know what you're talking about. Yeah. And I think about like us having breakfast that morning and like us being able to be together, and like hopefully that's the memory that sort of becomes in the foreground, and allowing like the old memory to not be the association. I think that it can be like a hot stove, like you just don't want to go back or you don't want to experience anything again when it's associated with this pain of this breakup. But I think it's really good advice to specifically kind of rewrite the story and reclaim. You don't want to give them that, like just give them this thing that gave you joy, or this place that's unique to you that you care about.
That's empowering, Hallie, to realize, like, yeah, you don't have to give that space to that person or that memory, that you do get to rewrite it. But you hear a lot when people are talking about breakups about, there's three stories. There's his story, her story, and the truth, or whatever, their story, and the truth. You have on Countdown 1480, you have fight denial, and you talk about making a what was true list. And I love how you illustrated this, Hallie, but I want to get your guidance on this, Suzy, because I think that can be harder to do than people might realize, like, how do you know what was actually true and what is your perception of the truth?
I wrote that list. It's not the same list that appears in the book, but I wrote my own list because it was a step that was helpful to me. And yeah, this is a funnier list than my actual list.
Now I want to know what was on your actual list. You don't have to tell us, but
It was too personal and too intense, and it was honestly very helpful. So because I'm a journalist, I had journaled heavily everything that was said because I thought I could figure my way through this if I just re-examine everything that he said and everything that he told me. And I went on like this for a long time. So my going back to journaling actual statements that he had made really helped me see that he was done. And things that he said, and it allowed me later, when you're in a state of extreme stress, I think your brain is it's stress brain. It's kind of a dementia-like state where you're just not able to really clarify what's going on. And by journaling things, I was able later to go back and see that, in fact, yes, he said those things, and yes, that's what he meant. And really, there was no coming back from this because you're constantly wanting to say, oh, well, if we get back together, maybe he'll dump the girlfriend and we'll get back together and we'll repair these issues with our marriage. And writing it down, and I honestly had a piece of paper that I kept in my purse, and I would look at it when I started to really miss him, which was all the time. It was endless, and I would hear his voice in the house. I would dream about him. It's 30 years of marriage is a lot to do away with, and looking at that list it's just such a harsh bit of reality to look at something in writing and say, yes, that's what he actually said, and that in fact was what he meant. And it was quite helpful. It was a little depressing, but it was quite helpful.
So did you just write things that he had said, or
I wrote
did you
things
write
that
your own?
that he did and that he said.
I would say while this list is not, exactly the list that my mom wrote, it is the true spirit of
It is. Yeah, it is
the
spirit
list,
of
which
it.
is like
Yeah.
things on it are like, found it easier to say no to you than to their mother. Even in the earliest years of your relationship, when you were the hottest you've ever been and ever will be, they suggested you lose a few pounds. Like,
Some of it's
there are things that are like,
yeah, miss me with that right off the bat.
there are things that are just like,
Yeah.
oh, if you actually distill this kind of condemning fact on paper and look at it, which is, I see why it's hard. That who wants to look at that?
Mm-hmm. Is there a place on this list for like your own personal truths as well, or do you find that not as helpful in the healing?
It ended so abruptly with that it was I was largely speechless and in shock. So my memory of that time, I was either speechless, in shock, or crying, and that went on for weeks. And so it felt like he would come in and, he'd come to move out of the house and he would tell me some new thing or tell me how in love he was with the girlfriend and how good he felt and how difficult this split was for him. And so it felt like I was a witness to something that I didn't have a voice in because I silenced myself because there was another person involved. And so that was I don't think I would be that way again in a different relationship, but I just felt like I couldn't speak really. I didn't have a voice. So maybe a healthier person could put their truths down on paper, but I felt like I was just looking at something externally driven that I was powerless over.
Wow. Yeah. Well, that's your experience of it. So
That's
therefore that that is your truth. I'm glad that you were able to find the methods that helped you regain some sense of power. I want to fast forward a bit to countdown 777 days. You talk about rewriting the script, and this is a point where in the book you've recovered enough to see that there is a future. Because I think we've spent a lot of time talking about the healing piece, which can take 3 years, can take 30 years, could take 3 months. It's different for everyone. But I talk a lot in my work about rewriting the script and rewriting the narratives and being in the driver's seat of what's the next phase of your life. But I also realize that is tough, and that can't really be done if you're in that phase that you were just describing of feeling sort of hopeless or overwhelmed or not in control. So you say you're now in charge of writing your own script. What kind of movie would you want a starring role in? How did you start to rewrite the script for yourself? And then what advice do you have to share, either of you, as you've both been through breakup situations? What advice would you have to share with anyone listening who's at that place of writing a new script for the future?
I found counseling very helpful in helping me move forward. I think if somebody is really in a traumatic, feels like they've been through a trauma, that counseling is very helpful. And allowing yourself a lot of grace and making incremental steps would be my suggestion. Have faith that over time, these small steps add up to your script rewrite, and it does not have to be half a script this week. It can be just a bit at a time, and you feel like you've made a little bit of progress both in healing and in moving to a new direction.
I love that. What about for you, Hallie?
There's such a grief to being separated, but I love that this spread is kind of this reminder when you're far enough along in the healing where it even because I think early on you couldn't be like, oh great, now you're totally unattached to anyone. But there is a point where it switches to being liberating. And I've obviously never gone through a breakup of this magnitude, but there is a point, I think, where, especially I've observed with my mom, where there's this slow awakening of possibility of the many directions life can now go. And at the before we got on the mic, my mom was sharing, we both live in Cincinnati, Ohio. My mom was able to move to my city to come help me raise my baby twins. And this is a reality that we are both still so amazed that this is possible, that we can live in the same place. And if not for this divorce, I don't think that would have happened. And it's such a dream in so many ways. And also you would never dream for such a painful breakup, but this is something that I told my mom I was having twins, and she was able to be like, all right, I'll be there. I'll see you there. And what a magical thing to be able to do.
Yeah, that's a great next chapter. I thought things were going to go a different direction when you were like, I love the spread on this page because the other half of the page is own your desire.
Yeah.
Spread.
The next page features a total sex shop scene, which was really fun to draw.
I was going to ask you, how is that, writing that, drawing sex toys scene for your mother, Hallie?
I had a great time. Yeah, I had a great time. I think it's important. I think it's important to talk about this stuff. And it's not like we are diving into the nitty gritty together, but the idea of a newly single person rediscovering desire. And I don't know, I think that it was really fun and liberating to be able to illustrate this character piling her basket with sex toys, because you're just gonna be numb forever. There's this true part of it. I don't think it's possible to write about a breakup from a romantic relationship without acknowledging, you know, the loss of that side of your life and what it would mean to like rediscover that for yourself. So I think it's really important. We've written a book about death already. It's like, I can't be shocked by that much.
Death, sex, money is next. Okay, we like to end all of our episodes with one last piece of advice, or one last perspective. So I'll ask you both, what is your most unpopular opinion about dating and relationships today? Your most unpopular opinion.
Well, I mean, I'm in a mood now. I was on these dating apps for a while, and I'm in a mood now. Just throw it away. I'm going to go, lift some babies in the air and eat some ice cream and call it good, because the dating apps were so funny and difficult, and I'm in an age group where the men aren't getting necessarily better.
That is putting it really lightly.
That's putting it mildly. And one of the funnest spreads we did was this synopsis of all the types, or a half dozen of the types of men that I had come across on the apps, and we were roaring with laughter because it's true. And so maybe it's a popular opinion that I could just. I think that's done for me now, because it just was like wading through mud.
Well, you are talking to a dating coach who specializes in helping people with dating apps. So if you ever change your mind, you know who to call.
Let's do it. Yes.
Hallie would like me to do it.
I actually really have. I've been like, maybe there's a dating coach in the future.
All right, Hallie, what about you? What's your most unpopular opinion?
I mean, so I was a real late bloomer. I had my first boyfriend, who is now my husband, at, I think I was 27. Being single isn't that bad. Like, I felt like I watched all of my friends be like obsessively chasing relationships, which I also was. It just didn't work. But yeah, it just felt like there was this like total phobia of being single. And I spent so much of my 20s watching my friends do truly everything within their power, dating the worst men, staying in the worst relationships to avoid being single. Meanwhile, I was like hanging out, watching The Sopranos, drawing comics. Like, I was like, this is great. And it did take me a good long time of being single to be like, oh, this is great. But yeah, I just don't. I think that the relationship is better than singledom at all costs is such a false paradigm. And I think that, when I got together with my husband, like he was a serial monogamist. He'd been in relationships throughout all of his 20s. He's hardly ever been single. Who was the more developed person who had such a deeper relationship with herself? And, now like in relationship, I've been like, oh, you got to get to know yourself so much better. But it's just this realization of like, oh, what valuable time. I'm so glad I had that. Was it kind of miserable at times? Yeah. But a lot of that was because I was just like obsessed with the idea that being with someone was better than being by myself no matter what. And I just don't believe that anymore.
That's so interesting that in a way, both of you have come to the same place in your unpopular opinions, just from different phases of life and different perspectives. So I can see why your perspectives came together so beautifully in this book. Thank you for being here and sharing your stories and your wisdom and your wonderful relationship as mother and daughter with us.
Thank you so much for having us. This was such a
Damona.
nice,
I appreciate
rich conversation.